Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center and Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org. Edina Eye Physicians and Surgeons, a division of Twin Cities Eye Consultants, has proudly served the Twin Cities for more than 55 years now in 7 convenient locations. Using the most advanced technology combined with human touch, Edina Eye offers comprehensive services and dedicated specialists committed to excellence, with innovative procedures and expertise for the most advanced eye care.
Welcome to Access to Democracy. I'm Bill Raker, your host for this edition of the program. We're excited to welcome our guest, Amy Miller, founder of Our Family Encounter, as our guest today. And a disclosure, Amy is not related to Alan Miller, who is the founder and producer of our program, Access to Democracy. So Amy, it's a pleasure to have you here. We have some exciting things that we want to talk about with you. And let's start the program by you sharing this interesting story about how you started the organization, Our Family Encounter.
Well, thank you for having me here. So I ended up founding Our Family Encounter by going to the wrong meeting. It was, do you remember that week in February of 2019 where it was super cold?
Oh, yes.
We had the practice shut down. Well, I had brain freeze, and instead of going to a meeting in Mendota Heights, or Mendota, I ended up going to West St. Paul. And at that meeting, it was called the World Day of the Sick. And I got to meet some healthcare professionals, and since I crashed their party, I had to meet some of them. And when I talked to the healthcare professionals, they said, you know, we have 2 problems we see happening within our patients. One is that people are coming to the emergency room and they don't have a healthcare directive, in which case we have to decide how to treat them. And then the second is more and more people coming to doctor appointments alone. So if we are giving them a diagnosis or providing them some information, they don't have anyone else there to ask questions or even get that information. Mm-hmm. So these were 2 problems that they said, do you know of anyone that's trying to solve this? And I was like, well, not really. I mean, I have met a few people since who are working on the healthcare directive and trying to have those conversations, but how to solve having people go to doctor appointments alone, that's really been a big mystery for the past, well, 3-4 years. So that's how we decided to start Our Family Encounter.
So that mistaken meeting that you went to gave you the idea of establishing this organization. So what's the mission? What objectives did you have in mind as you brought Our Family Encounter into existence?
Well, one of my main objectives is to get people to start talking, because people think death is bad. Well, death is part of life. But it's also bringing the family around. So I found that when a lot of people were working with professionals, they would be working directly with that one professional, but there's no conversation going between professionals. So you might talk to your attorney or your financial planner. They're not really talking to each other because of confidentiality. Well, the one group that definitely does not get included and oftentimes is purposely excluded is the family. And yet, when you think about who's providing your care, who do you ultimately want to leave a legacy to, it's your family. So it's like there's a piece of the puzzle that's been removed from the conversation. And so that's where I was like, how do we solve that problem? Knowing that there's family dynamics, there's lots of different situations, everyone's kind of got their own unique situation. How do we find a way to have those conversations, bring people together, and see what that long-term legacy can become. So really, it's opening up this conversation.
So your insight to this situation was identifying this gap or these disconnects between the various parties that are a part of or interested in the end of life of individuals. And so the objective here is to try to close that gap, make those connections, and make a better experience for the stakeholders in this interchange.
Correct.
So what are some of the techniques that you use to do that?
First, it's to get people to talk, which this is a great opportunity, so thank you for this. Because people are thinking that's not going to happen today. I don't have that on my calendar, so I can check it off. And then a lot of times people have lived so far apart that we've lost that daily connection. So it used to be we lived close to our family members, so we could keep track of what's happening. So many family members are spread all over the globe, so there is no conversation anymore. And then something else that's also been happening that's kind of coming to light now is more people are aging alone. So it's what we call a solo senior. They, through life or circumstance or choice, they are, do not have a spouse and do not have children, or their children live far away. And there's some other considerations with that too, but that whole idea of the family, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, and bunch of children, that part of the demographic has changed within what we have, in addition to the aging demographic of baby boomers and then children. There's this change that's happening in our society probably faster than we recognize. So we have to rethink how things used to be done may not be how they can be done going forward.
And so you're bringing that rethinking to the forefront and trying to provide some guidance or some influence or impetus for these different organizations and the families to work together.
What I've done is this is where I ended up writing a book.
Tell us about your book.
Over the last
Amy.
couple of years, because I was like, I can't get this information out. I used to be able to, okay, let's have a meeting and I'll do a presentation and you'll leave with lots of questions answered. But over the last few years, we couldn't do that. My ability to meet people was really difficult. So I ended up writing this book.
Show us the book.
It's called, hopefully you can read it, it's called Last Life Lesson, Guide for Aging Adults and Their Families. And the idea behind this book is kind of more like a handbook. So here's the topics of aging, which they stem from what I call the big four, which is your legal, financial, end-of-life, funeral planning, and your care, right? I add in housing, socialization, how are you staying social, legacy, how are you passing on to your wishes to other generations, and then there is a topic specifically for veterans and specifically for solos. So what do you need to know? What are the options out there as it exists in 2022? Things may change, but in 2022, what does it look like? And then at the end of every chapter, it comes up with a checklist. What are the documents you need to have? Because when it all comes down to it, your executor, trustee, court signed administrator has to close your estate down. One of the things I've learned is everyone seems to think this ends at the end of the funeral, right? There's a whole nother 2 years to go, potentially, or at least 6 months, to close out your estate. And what's interesting is the people that often are chosen to be your trustee or executor are not professionals. They're a member of your family, and they have no knowledge, no support. Ideally, if you have a good lawyer that's been engaged, they get the support from the lawyer, but otherwise, they're going through this whole process in the blind. So how can we help close that gap and make it so aging is not, one, so scary, but two, that we're thinking beyond to actually what is our legacy going to be.
So part of your mission here is to help people understand that there are some things that they need to take care of and that they need to document before it's too late.
Correct. So there's, like I said, the need. You think, oh yeah, everyone's, oh that's my will, or that's my pre-planning funeral meeting. Okay, yeah, those are both highly desired, should be done, especially if they can be paid for as well. not just do it, but pay for it as well. But there's a lot of other things about how are you aging, and I think because this is not thought out ahead of time and not communicated within whoever you choose to be your advisors, whether it's your children or your best friend or your professional advisors, people then have to guess, how do you want to be treated?
Which is not the right way to do it.
It opens people up for being scammed. It makes it very easy. And I'll just explain, a neighbor of mine just lost her husband a month ago. And the day before the funeral, she called me up saying, Amy, I just found out that I have a Facebook Messenger account saying I'm looking for money. And I have no idea how this happened. It's my name on the account. And so I went down to her house, and first of all, we changed her password, and we put two-factor authentication, which her husband had beautiful records of here's the passwords, and those little things you never think about, like what is my password for my phone and for my computer? Do you realize you have to get a court order to get into someone's computer if you don't have their password?
I don't
That's
think our
a
viewers,
nightmare.
many of our viewers know that, which is really a critical
Fascinating.
piece.
Or even your
to have.
cell phone, your
Yeah.
code to get in your cell phone. Now, some people don't have codes, but if you don't have facial recognition, which you won't because you've passed away, how does someone get into your phone? It's fascinating. So if you can document little things like that that people may not be thinking about, that's important. So he had beautiful records for her. So we were able to go in, change that within 5 minutes. As we were talking, I said, you just posted his obituary. She said, yes. I was like, well, that makes a lot of sense. Do you realize how many password questions are answered in an obituary? Where were you born? What's your middle name? How many children do you have? What's the name? Where did you go to school?
People don't think of that, do they?
Isn't it fascinating?
Yeah.
So that becomes a way that people are using to scam. And people are like, well, my information's private. And you just realize and I don't know if this was intentional or not, but just by putting an obituary, not knowing what to put in, what not to put in, or maybe can you rephrase it in a different way, you might be able to intervene in such a circumstance.
I think that's really valuable advice for our viewers. And this book, this workbook that you've prepared, helps people realize all of those facets of what they need to take care of.
Yes.
So if our viewers are interested in the book, how do they get one?
So this is something I am producing myself. So I have both an ebook, so it's electronic, or it's in printed copy. It's off of my website.
So they go to your website,
Yes.
which we're scrolling on the screen as our program is there. So if
Right.
you take down Amy's website and you're interested in a copy of this very helpful and very informative book, that's where you can get it.
Right.
So at the beginning of the conversation, you talked about getting people to talk, which is, nothing really happens unless people talk and communicate together.
Correct.
So how do you encourage or how do you motivate people to have these conversations when, as you said, it's like the last thing they're thinking of because it isn't present here and now and I don't have to worry about it? How do you get people to start those conversations?
When I've discovered that, I'll let you know. Honestly, the conversations start usually when there's a crisis. And I need this conversation really to start probably when you're looking at retirement or much, much earlier, because as any attorney will tell you, you need to have documentation already assigned ahead of time. Any doctor will tell you you need to have these decisions done before there's a capacity question. So whether or not you have the ability to speak for yourself. One of the most important decisions anyone can make, and actually everyone needs to make, whether you're 18 years old, and I would highly recommend this at 18 years old, as well as any time in life, is to decide who can speak for you if you cannot speak for yourself. An 18-year-old never thinks this is going to happen, but as every parent who sends their children away to college in another state goes, I can't speak for my children anymore, even though they're in another state. And if they have a health care issue, that's a hard thing to come across, especially in some states. For example, in the state of Massachusetts, spouses can't even speak for each other unless they're authorized. So that's
documented that they can do this.
documented, and that's where that health care directive comes in. So going back to where the doctors had told me, or the healthcare professionals told me, you go into the emergency room and you do not have a healthcare directive on file, we don't know who to speak to.
Yeah.
And if you're 18 or older, you need to have that document. This is important for children, for immigrants, no, it doesn't matter what your financial status is. If you're married, if you're single, or if you're a parent with children, you need to identify who can speak for you. Now, there's two documents. This gets a little confusing, but there's you think of like the will, people call a living will, or just your will and last testament. One is for your legal and your financial conversations. And then the healthcare directive is specifically for healthcare conversations. They're not the same.
These are different than a power of attorney kind of document. Is that correct?
The power of attorney is your will and your financial.
Okay.
They're
okay.
not. That's not the same as your healthcare. So healthcare is one. So they've been separated into two. And sometimes people like to think that they're all the same. They like to meld it together. But they are physically two different conversations, two different people. You can, as a healthcare directive, you can assign multiple people. So you can have, your parents, your children.
Who can make decisions
who can
for you.
make those decisions if you cannot speak for yourself. People, as we talk about access to democracy, that is probably the most important right that we have as Americans, is identifying who can speak for us.
And to help guide the decisions that you want them to make when you're not able to do so.
Well, ideally you'll have a conversation outside of that.
Let's talk about this conversation. Who are the parties that should be involved in these kinds of discussions, these kinds of conversations?
Are you thinking from healthcare or from
legal,
financial?
Well, let's start with the primary people to communicate would be the family members, the immediate members of an individual's family. And who else do they need to talk among themselves, I suppose? And what are the other parties that they need to have these conversations with?
So again, it's assuming, and this is where a lot of it depends on your financial situation, because if you don't have much money, your choices are going to be pretty limited.
Yes.
If you have a lot of money, your choices are going to be almost whoever you want. But then what I call the forgotten middle, which I know you're like, I'm curious about that term.
We're going to get to that.
But the idea is you want someone who you believe to be responsible for your legal and your financial. So whoever is in your life, and it doesn't need to be an immediate family member. No, it could be your banker. It could be a financial planner. It could be a combination. You can have family member and a financial planner working together.
But a trusted,
someone
who's trusted individual or a trusted organization.
Who has good financial sense, good legal sense. Likewise, for healthcare, you may choose someone who understands the medical industry, or who can speak for you. Maybe is not blinded by the white coats. I mean, not to be dissing our doctors or anything, but sometimes the doctors will say, this is the way it is, and this is the only way it's going to be. And you have someone who's got some gumption and saying, but that's not their wish. Because there's a lot of medical decisions that are being promoted that are they what you wish? Whether it's, am I to be resuscitated? Am I to be, assisted suicide? Those are big conversations that impact people individually. And knowing what someone's perspective is on that and being willing to stand up is a really important person to find in your life.
It's easy to see why these kinds of conversations are difficult to have and difficult to even initiate, just to bring up the subject to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any suggestions? I asked this question one way previously. I'll ask it a little bit differently now. Do you have any suggestions for how to ease into a discussion like that without people just shutting down and saying, I don't want to talk about it?
One thing I'm seeing that's happening right now, and I know we touched on this earlier, is housing. Yeah. And if you can't live in your home, where would you live? Again, going back to that conversation about how much money you have, will determine where can you live. A lot of people are making that choice today to do multi-generational housing. Well, that's a great time to have these conversations, because if you're going to be living with somebody, they need to know some answers to be able to be effective. So housing is a big way to go in. Right now, property taxes is a hot topic. I mean, I don't know about your property taxes, but I'm looking at mine going, boy, if I was on a limited income, this would be really hard for me to pay. It may be a choice. Do I eat? Do I pay my long-term care insurance? Do I pay my property tax? It's, you know, these are big decisions. And having those hard choices of, could I even live with somebody else? That's a hard conversation to start, but it's one that's not too personal, right?
Yeah, yeah. So this is really helpful. You can start the conversation around housing or around taxes, or if some kind of medical situation, a semi-emergency medical situation comes up within the family, that might be an opening to say, you know, maybe we need to talk about this a little bit further and look at all of the decisions that we'll have to make down the line.
And asking, what are their wishes? I think many of us go into it assuming we know what someone's wishes are, but literally, what are your wishes? And then document it. I mean,
that's the theme, right? Document your wishes, yeah.
Because you might be having that conversation with, you know, one child, and then with your sister, and then with the neighbor down the street, and then next thing you know, it's, well, who's right? And that is actually, when you think, that's the reason why I go all the way through the end of probate, the end of closing out your estate. That's when those conversations come up. Well, mom said I could have that quilt. Well, no, that quilt's mine. Or, you know, we hate to say this, but every once in a while, I'm sure this has never happened to anybody, where someone passes away and someone goes to the house and they just grab the quilt.
They take what they want, yeah.
I mean, there's nothing to keep them from doing that, unless there is something documented saying, my quilt, I'm just using that as an example, will go to my sister or my granddaughter, or, you know, you've designated who it goes to. Now, sometimes it's hard to get every little item documented, but you'll hear of someone who says, I put a sticky note next to all the important items, so it's identified who gets what. But again, it's having those decisions made in advance, at least on the big stuff. To what is important to you. And so how you want to be treated is something I think people assume we're all going to treat each other nice, but we realize
in stressful situations, maybe we don't.
But this is where also knowing who can speak for you, because you know who is honorable. And so you want to make sure that those people are involved in that decision making.
Great.
Yeah.
You used a term, an expression that I'd like you to talk a little bit more about. You call it the forgotten middle.
Yes.
Tell us about what the forgotten middle is and why we should be concerned about it or aware of it.
Well, aware of it. So, like I mentioned before, what you can pay for generally tends to determine what kind of a retirement you can have. So if you have, and this is where our society is designed this way, right? So if you have a certain amount of income, and I would say, I think in the state of Minnesota, it's $3,000 or less, and you're single. If you're married, I think it's $120,000 in your home. But if you're single, it's $3,000 in your home of all your assets, in which case you can qualify for elderly waiver. So basically, you have to be bankrupt for all intents and purposes. So that's what Medicaid covers. That's what elderly waiver is covered by your county. So that's, I would say, maybe 20% of the senior population. That's what we can cover.
A significant portion.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we want that. We want to know that that safety net's there. On the other end of the spectrum, we have those who have, I would say, $2 million or more. Plenty of assets. You can get all the advice and the guidance, private nursing if you want it. You can get what you want. You can have a beautiful retirement, right? The one that we all think we all should have. What happens is the remaining 50% is what we call the forgotten middle. So they don't have enough money to get whatever they want, but they have too much money to get any help. If that makes any sense.
Well, it does.
And so how do we get the information we need to talk and guide these people? Now, a lot of professionals say, that's the group I want to be talking to. But when you talk to, let's say, attorneys, estate planning attorneys, elder care attorneys, they go, why is only 37% of Minnesotans have a plan? What's up with the other 63? Because they just don't have it on their list of things to do today. So how do we get that 63% to get on board and get a plan put in place? And again, it doesn't have to be anything complex, just have something done. That's just your will. That doesn't include care, it doesn't include your funeral plan, it doesn't include leaving anything for your favorite charity or family members.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, you've talked about a lot of important information and issues and situations in our program today, Amy. What would be some of the more important and critical messages that you would want our viewers to hear and to understand and to act on?
Well, not to push my book, but that's why I wrote it. It's to get your plan documented. That's one. And one can be where you do it yourself, and that's designed so you can read it and work on it yourself. For others, they want someone to come alongside and keep them accountable. So I will actually sit down and help people create that plan for, about a 6-month time frame, so they get all their decisions
Would that
done.
be a professional kind of person, like an attorney or an accountant? Or
No, it's me. This would be
Oh,
what
it's
I
you.
do.
Oh, this is what you
I
do. Okay.
You can see I come, here's a creative idea. We bring in the professionals as you need it. So we have a team in place. And this is something I really promote for those who are aging alone, who do not have an extended family to lean on, or maybe they do, but they're out of town, out of country, out of the neighborhood, is to have someone have these decisions done, and then ultimately get it to the state where you have all your paperwork collected. And it's what I have a tool called a legacy box. Hopefully that's not going to be a trademark issue, but to collect all your documents. Because ultimately it's what do you need to have for your executor, your trustee, or your administrator. Because they have to close your estate out with probate. So what do they need to do that? So that's the idea of that plan. And then ultimately at the end is to walk with the family when there is critical conversations being needed, and guide people through that time.
To wrap up our program today, Amy, if people are interested in more information or want to talk with you about some of the issues that you've brought up today, what's the best way to contact you or your organization, Our Family Encounter?
So one is great is my website. So hopefully people have seen the website name. Mm-hmm. My number, 952-679-8332, or you can email me. It's Amy, AMY, at ourfamilyencounter.com.
Repeat those one more time. Just make sure people have an opportunity to record that information.
So it's ourfamilyencounter.com, which is my website. My phone number is 952-679-8332, or feel free to email me, Amy, AMY, at ourfamilyencounter.com.
Thank you, Amy. Our guest today has been Amy Miller, the founder of Our Family Encounter. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you.